tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Agajanian Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Our guests in the studio are Greg Colson and Julia Cameron. Greg Colson lives and works in Los Angeles. He has a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Cal State Bakersfield, where he was raised and where he went to school, and a master's from Claremont Graduate School. Greg has had shows in Rome, Milan, Bruges, Dusseldorf, and across America. His art is in the Panza collection in Switzerland, in the Modern Museum of Art, in the MoCA in downtown Los Angeles. And what fascinated me the most about this series of collections that he's in is the Sorrentino, is that right? In Moscow. How did that happen?
Well, I think that came about. I just had my first exhibition in New York City, and some collectors had brought Pontus Hultin, the museum director, to my studio, and he saw my work there and he was organizing an exhibition for the Russian Museum in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, and so that's really how it came about. And a group of us from Los Angeles went over to Leningrad, and we actually made the work there, and we were in this exhibition, and the director from the museum in Moscow, I guess, saw my work and asked if I would donate something to the museum. So
well, that's great, because you've shown, I think, more than many artists from the United States in Europe. Did you ever live there or teach there? No. It's really, I guess, you mean how did I start showing? You have so many. I saw a show of yours in Milan.
Well, what really happened was doing exhibitions in Los Angeles and New York, and then collectors and gallery people seeing the work there, and then becoming familiar with it, and then offering me shows. Because it would be difficult to, as an artist in Los Angeles and not having been to Europe before, to know who to approach and to get an exhibition.
Usually your dealer does it, or an agent,
someone who takes an interest in your work. Yeah.
But you have had so many shows in Europe that I thought maybe you were teaching there.
Not that many.
Yeah, it seems like it. You've got a nice long list. This art is very graphic, I guess. I guess we call it graphic. Can you explain it for us?
Well, I suppose it's graphic because I really come out of painting. In school, I studied painting and drawing and sort of did a lot of more traditional forms of art. And since I've been exhibiting, for the most part, I've created wall sculptures or wall objects that kind of straddled the border between painting and sculpture. There's visual elements and then three-dimensional elements. So
but are they found objects, or are they new objects?
A lot of times they are. Of the works I'm showing here.
This one right here, the middle, is a photograph of a
these
sculpture.
Three are photographs, and then this is a study for one of the pie chart works, which are the most recent works.
But let's talk about the sculpture that it actually is mounted on a wall and has a dimension to it.
Right. It projects out from the wall. This particular sculpture is entitled North, South, East, West with Mustard Bottle. And I was interested in putting these four elements together to create this sort of grid or matrix, and each element projects or emits a different substance or has a different kind of association. The mustard bottle, the toy military plane flying up, the implied sound coming from from the horn, and then this homemade funnel. So you have this implied, fluid.
So it's not just haphazard, it's something that's totally thought out. Are you a mathematician?
No, but I guess I don't know, I studied some math and science in school. I think one of the things I'm interested in doing in my work is having an interplay between intention and accident, having different elements within the work interfere with each other. And in the north, south, east, west piece, you have these like 4 different gestures that are at odds with each other, and there's sort of a balance to the piece, but it's not symmetrical in the sense that each object comes from a different place and has its different associations. So there's different ways of reading the the composition of the piece, or if you were to compare which of these objects has more influence. There's all different ways
levels of it.
Yeah, talking about food or the military or the power of sound or whatever.
So if a person just came in to see it and didn't know really what was in your mind, it looks like a nice kind of collage of things together that makes a nice picture.
Who
explains this? Who would explain
what, you mean in a gallery?
Yeah.
Well, usually people just walk into galleries, and the director may be there, and if they ask questions, someone
then they start finding out.
Yeah, but not necessarily. I always hope that someone coming upon my work for the first time can get into it on some level without having having a lot of description.
What about the photograph underneath is a map? And I remember when you first started doing those, and you had the streets lettered, but they didn't necessarily go together. They weren't necessarily all the streets in one neighborhood, I saw.
Well, this particular piece is a map of Cleveland, Ohio. So the found objects that I've used to compose this map sort of take the general form of the main highways and streets and freeways of Cleveland.
Did you live there?
And no,
I know that.
Well, I worked from a map, and
is that so you didn't have to be? You don't have to be on the streets.
Well, I've been through there, but I mean, with the map works. Again, I'm interested in sort of having the viewer go back and forth between reading it as a map or the association of the specific place, and looking at it like that, or looking at it as a gathering of a fishing pole or a car antenna. These are found objects that make up the piece. So the viewer, I'm interested in the way the mind sort of goes back and forth between the what the objects represent and where they came from.
It's hard to tell that those are fishing poles. And
I know
things.
It's a small.
But does that project off the wall as well?
Well, it comes off maybe 3 inches.
So it's a dimensional piece.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was fascinating were these pie. What do you call them?
Pie charts.
Pie charts. Well, they're pie charts, but they're your paintings. And they're so intense, and I wondered how you did the research for them, or how you came upon these.
Well, they're the most recent works. I've been working on them for the last year on this series, and a lot of my work has involved some type of graph or chart, or map, something that represents our attempts at understanding and analyzing our life or the world. And then what I'm interested in is allowing some of the incidental aspects of the construction or other elements in the image itself to interfere with the clear reading of the map or the graph.
Oh, I see. So
and with the pie chart, you have this assumption that there's this clear, precise information, in which there is, but I play up other elements of the pie chart, like the visual icon that represents each category.
Well, this is great. Let's talk about this. This is not a drawing, but it's a study of a large piece.
It's a collage drawing. I actually cut out the different pie slices out of pieces of paper and tape them and glue them on. So it's a collage.
And then do you do a painting of this afterwards? Once you've done. So tell us about this, because I think these are the fears. This pie chart is
the title of this is Fear Survey, and it's based on a survey about what people were asked what is their greatest fear.
And so it's really a real survey, or is this just a survey in your own mind?
Well, this was actually a composite of a couple of different surveys that I came across. One was in a newspaper, and then another in a medical book.
So you do research
these
things?
Yeah. And you have the different categories of fears: public speaking, crime, death and disease are the three big ones. Flying, fear of heights, natural disasters, that's a little hurricane. Fear of fat, that's a stick of butter. Terrorism, you have a bomb. Other fears, which would include spiders and snakes and the dark.
Creatures.
And technology.
And what's this?
That's the fear of failure, and so that I have a typewriter chucked in a garbage can.
The journalist who can't get anything done.
Well, my wife is a writer, and she's so it was probably
a favorite of hers.
Well, I don't know. It probably came out of that.
Public speaking. I mean, when I called you, you said you didn't want to come on the show. That was your big fear.
Well, but no, that is actually a very large fear in surveys. So
that's great.
Yeah. But there are other ways of looking at this too. I think there are some of the incidental ways, like you almost have 4 architectural elements, like with the butter and the building, with the podium and the coffin.
So you put that all together. I mean, that's in your mind when you're doing it?
I put that in, and I like the sort of incidental or accidental relationship between some of the visual elements that's less predictable than just the dry data.
Is color important in your work?
Sometimes it is. I think it's more important in a lot of the pie chart works, because it's such a important device for dividing the different categories.
So you do use that in the back. When
this
study goes onto a painting, will it stay this color, or will you use color in it?
It'll stay that color. I wanted to do this pie chart, the fear survey, in shades of black and gray, because there's sort of a more ominous tone to it, and I sometimes have a reason for the color scheme in the pieces. Sometimes it's more arbitrary, but other times I like to have a rationale for it.
Well.
And in some of the other pie charts, I've observed arrangements of color or systems of color out in the world somewhere, and then I'll apply it to a given subject.
I see. Are you going to continue pie chart paintings?
Well, there's some things I want to do with them that I haven't done yet. It seems like a pretty rich.
It's great. Will you make them jump off the wall then and make them into sculpture?
They not really more than what they do. It's interesting that when you see the actual pie chart in person, they're a lot more physical and graphic, and the materials are much more apparent.
When I saw them in Milan, it totally draws you in. I just walked into the gallery and there were these big paintings,
kind of jumping
and you just you can't stop reading. All of a sudden you are really into it, and it's not like just viewing a piece of art.
Right, and they're kind of absurd because they just they are of something out in the world, and
I know,
and then you have.
Go, is that me? Did
Yeah.
I think that, or am I going to do that?
But I'm also interested in like the way the different materials interact. Like I use different sections of plywood or masonite or different kinds of wood that have varying degrees of depth.
I see.
And if you look, I don't know, you probably can't see it here, but you can see like a slight shadow cast where something comes out a little more and maybe emphasizes the category.
They're not
more,
just flat pieces.
Right.
Well, I'm glad I'm glad you came today. Our time
Well, I really appreciate you inviting me. Thank you,
I
Joan.
know another thing you did is a children's book, and we didn't get to talk about it, but I think it's so great when artists do things like that. And
well, that was a fun project
spread
to do.
out. I think, was it the Getty Press?
Yes, yes. I have a friend who started a publishing company having to do with children's books.
So that's fabulous. So keep that up, because I think children's books are really wonderful, and for them to see art, real fine art on the pages. So Greg Colson, thanks very much for being with us.
Yes.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with Julia Cameron. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and we're back in the studio with Julia Cameron. Julia is an artist, poet, teacher, filmmaker, musician, mother. I think I could go on and on and on about Julia. But her play, Four Roses, made its world premiere at the Century City Playhouse. Tell us a little bit about Four Roses, then we'll get back into all these other things that you do.
Well, Four Roses, I think, defines the term drama. It is four women struggling with substance abuse. An alcoholic, slightly over-the-hill actress, a woman who is as addicted to men as she is to alcohol, a young, abused and very angry addict, and a woman who has buried herself both in the bottle and in her husband's life. And they have come together at a treatment center, which is named after the whiskey Four Roses, and they're confronting themselves and their demons.
I thought, when I first went to see it, I thought the Four Roses were the four women in the play, and you were talking about these roses who were on stage instead of the bottle Four Roses.
Well, that's part of why I chose that title, because I think that when we think of women and alcoholism, you know, a woman only needs to drink a third of the time a man does in order to be damaged. And in that sense, a woman is very much like a rose. It's our beautiful flower, but it's also our delicate flower. If you handle roses, they do become bruised very easily. So for me, the title Four Roses, as both an alcohol and an alcoholic, a feminine alcoholic, was a perfect matchup.
Well, then I did get some of it. I got some of it. And also, when I told Clifford Miller, who does our flowers from the flower shop, that I was interviewing you today, he sent over all these roses, which are very beautiful.
That's wonderful.
In honor of Four Roses, your play. Some people think that writers, and you wrote this play, didn't you?
Oh, of course.
You wrote the play. Draw from an autobiographical background. Did this happen in this case?
Well, it's very interesting to me when people say, is Four Roses autobiographical?
Yeah, we have to ask you that.
There are 6 women in the play. I would say I have parts of each of those 6 women. I have never been a heroin addict, but I'm a very good reporter with lots of reporting history, and I know a lot about heroin addiction.
So that was a role that was the young girl.
That's the young girl. On the other hand, I am a sober alcoholic, so I know a lot about getting sober.
And you also know a lot about what goes on in the treatment center, I would think.
Well, when I got sober, it was 1978, and treatment centers weren't how you did it.
Oh, I see.
But I subsequently have learned a lot about that. I've known many people who have gotten sober, and the other details of the women's lives were, there's an interesting line from Somerset Maugham, who was criticized once for having published a short story collection too much like his old ones. And he said, well, it's the mixture as before. And then in his introduction, he said, you know, unless Shakespeare were in some part Iago, he couldn't have written Iago. If he weren't in some part Othello, he couldn't have written Othello. So I believe that as an artist, you drop down the well and you imagine a world and a personality. And I've had therapists, I'm not a therapist, but I've had therapists come to the play and come out and go, thank God someone who really knows therapists, and we have a full-bodied therapist.
They understood it.
And
but the thing, and going back to what you were saying about how you put yourself or you find yourself, I collect portraits, and I see the artist in every portrait puts a little bit of himself in there. You get a nose, or you get an eye, or you get something that's of the artist who's actually putting himself in there. So when you talk about Shakespeare had to be a little part of those people, it's so true. I think artists have to draw on that, or artists do draw on that.
well, the way that I think of it is when we're shooting on this set, we have gels in front of the lights which give a certain tint to the,
Yes.
to the light.
That's true.
When a piece of art moves through an artist, it picks up some of the tint or coloration of that artist. So you may get someone who says, oh, poetically written. Well, you know, last year I had a poetry album out. So there is a certain Julia Cameron coloration that comes through,
Right.
whether I'm writing for Miami Vice, or I'm writing children's books, or writing
A
this
journalistic
play,
piece, or a journal.
there's some tincture. It's almost a homeopathic, tiny little distillate, but I'm sure it's there as a trace.
Did you have anything to do with the casting of Four Roses?
I sat in on the casting. The producer, Rosemary Weldon, is a very gifted casting director, and Rosemary and I have been friends for 30 years.
I see.
And John Newland, who is the director, who is now 80 years old and has discovered some of the more brilliant actors that we know. He was a founding director on Peyton Place. So John had, for me, the final word, but someone would come in and the three of us would look at it and say, maybe that's our Mara.
But that's why, I mean, your daughter, Domenica Cameron Scorsese, has a role in it. She plays a very pathetic, sad, sweet character.
Right.
Did you? And when I was reading her bio, she said, oh, my mother wrote this role for me. But what if someone else had come in?
Oh, actually, the role is double cast, and another girl does it very well.
Oh, it is double cast.
Sure, but Domenica had also worked with John Newland 4 times. And so really, when I decided to put the play up, I said to Domenica, there is a lovely part for you, but let's see what John thinks. And John cast Domenica, John and Rosemary.
I see. Now, I don't want to lose track of time here because it's so important. When I was reading your bio, I loved it. It said all these things that you did, and then it said, plus a colorful past.
Yes.
What's a colorful past?
My past is not dissimilar to your own. In the period when you were working for Andy Warhol, I was married to Domenica's father, Martin Scorsese. I was writing for Rolling Stone.
Were you living in New York then?
No, we lived out here, but we were also in New York often.
I just feel like I know you for years. I feel like I do know you.
We would have traveled in some of the same artistic water. I wrote for Rolling Stone, the Washington Post. I worked at the Los Angeles Herald, as you did.
And so
I
did
was
I, right.
a columnist for Jim Bellows.
Right.
And then 10 years ago directed a feature film, and I have had many different artistic venues,
Right.
and a lot of spills and chills in all of them, because you cannot be an artist in our culture without having to go through very tricky water.
That's true,
And
very true. And especially as a writer, to be able to be a journalist, to be able to write, say, children's books, screenplays, all the things you do, you have to draw on many, many different things from within.
Well, one of the things that I did about 10 years ago, I wrote a book called The Artist's Way.
I wanted you to tell us about that because it's like work. You've done workshops along with it. So
I've been teaching many years.
So tell us about that.
Well, one of the things that I learned is that survival as an artist is a lot like survival as an athlete. You will inevitably be injured. The trick is to learn how to come back from the injuries. How do you survive savage reviews? How do you survive superlative reviews?
This tells all of that? This helps you?
The Artist's Way is a book that is intended to mend up artists who have been damaged. Sometimes they've been damaged in grammar school and have not gone back to playing the piano in 30 years. Sometimes they've been damaged on the front lines in Hollywood where they've done a brilliant film, and then the next film the critics are laying for them.
Yes.
So brilliant or not, it won't be well received.
Right.
So I learned a lot about how to help people mend. And the Artist's Way and the workshops that I taught for 2 decades now are all aimed at helping people get back on their feet creatively, have the courage to walk back out into the arena and make a piece of art, show a piece of art.
And be able to have that courage to do it again, I guess.
Well, we live in an anti-art culture. We live in a culture which believes that artists should only do one thing. It's sort of the lug bolt mentality, like you're allowed to perhaps be a playwright, but you can't then turn around and write a novel. Creativity is actually very hydra-headed. Creative people are often good visually and verbally. Someone may be a very fine actor and a superb photographer. But in our culture, we discourage this.
It's actually just what I said before you even started talking. The idea that I said you can do so many things. Like, it's like a shock that somebody can do so many things, and yet you're saying you should be able to do it. Right.
What I do is normal.
Right.
And what I teach is how other people can do more of the same thing. So I am sort of a floor sample of my own toolkit.
I think that's so great, and I'm so glad. I can't believe the time is up already.
Oh, it's
the time
nice
is finished. Time is finished. But for you to be able to say that, because so many artists come on the show, and I'm interviewing so many people like that, and to know that there's a place that if there's some kind of little slip, that there's a place where they can go, and there's somebody that can give them encouragement, and you're a great person to give encouragement.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank
and doing
you.
this.
Thank you for being here. And thanks for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep writing, 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 917, and we will answer all your letters. Goodbye. Thanks. Thank you, Julia.